Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Winston Codes On. And today I want to talk about how my role as a software engineer has been feeling a lot more stressful lately. And the reason for that is because there's so many new developments going on in the software industry that it's very difficult to keep up with things and keep my skills sharp. Every week, every month, it feels like there's some new kind of tool coming out that radically changes the type of software programming that I'm doing. If you look back over the last 10 years or so of the changes that have taken place, like the rise of Python, now you've got the Go language out there, there's Rust, those are languages that have been introduced, but there's also new frameworks. React is constantly changing, Vue's constantly changing. There's always some new way of doing front end, there's always some new build tool of doing your JavaScript. And now there's a big transition to TypeScript where people like TypeScript. Everybody wants to use it. Some people are kind of rejecting that movement. But also, AI is on the horizon, and that threatens to take away a lot of jobs, or at the very least, materially change the way that we work as engineers into the future. I feel like in every program that I work on right now, there are dependencies, open source libraries that are constantly breaking the code that I'm trying to maintain because every week there's like some new version of something gets pushed out and it's incompatible with another software package, and then that raises an error that breaks the entire program. The code has to be updated. I'm constantly on Stack Overflow trying to figure out what changed. I'm looking at the GitHub issues, and it feels like that's a lot of what I'm doing now. It's just maintaining software to just keep it running on the latest version of things. And then on top of that, when you have all these new build tools coming out where it feels like the software you're developing is a moving target, the team that you're working on is constantly evaluating, well, maybe we should rewrite a whole bunch of code so that it uses this new, somewhat marginally better build tool that's a little bit faster than the last one. But if you're new to programming and you're just learning how to code, gosh, I can't imagine how difficult it is to climb this learning curve, because in contrast to how it was when I started about 15 years ago, or probably even 20 or more years ago, there are a lot more intersecting technologies involved in just making an application work. What I want to talk about and show you today are a couple of articles I found that show maybe this problem isn't just me feeling old or out of date, that maybe other people are feeling it too, and the burnout that this causes is a real thing. So the first article I want to highlight is called Unpopular Opinion. It's harder than ever to be a good software engineer. And this person followed the very standard, typical way up the ladder of being a developer from intern all the way up to senior developer. So what does it mean to be a good engineer? As engineers, we're responsible for translating complex problems into efficient and scalable solutions. We're tasked with analyzing user requirements, designing software architecture, writing code, and testing and debugging software. Expected to stay on top of trends, seeking new business opportunities and ways to improve existing products. And I agree with that being a software engineer involves a lot more than just writing bits of code. That's just a part of the job. That really, software engineering encompasses a whole lot of problem-solving techniques and soft skills that involve interacting with other people, your customers, other constituents in the business, and determining what they want and making that a reality. One of the important aspects of being a good software engineer is to have relevant skills so that you could write code that is maintainable and has longevity and is easily worked on by other people. The author of this article goes on to say that based on numerous interviews, he noticed that people with different levels of experience might give different answers as to what makes a good software engineer. So some people, especially the newer ones, think it's based on the number of languages and frameworks that a developer knows, but more experienced engineers might not even care about the language that they're using, but instead cares more about code quality and adhering to code principles and conducting good QA. Now, I think those are both good responses, but my personal opinion kind of leans towards what those experienced engineers say, which is more so about code quality and designing a good program, because the languages and the frameworks, they change over time. If you could design a good program, that's a skill that you could transfer to pretty much any programming framework. This is a good statement here. Highly experienced engineers place enormous focus on bringing value. Sometimes we'll quickly write throwaway code that breaks all the rules to prove a hypothesis. Sometimes we'll spend days writing a couple lines of mission-critical code. That's correct as what I could say from my experience. On most days, we're making architectural decisions, discussing mission-critical issues, and improving processes, because those are the things that bring value. So this person says that, summing it up, a good engineer is one that efficiently focuses their effort to bring maximum value in achieving a goal. And that's something that I agree with, because to your client, whoever you're building the system for, they don't really care so much about the underlying technology. They want the system that you're designing to actually do something and fulfill a real world need. And this is why in the last video I put out there, I did some criticism of Theo, who's a very enthusiastic TypeScript proponent, in that some developers really like certain frameworks because a framework has this or that really cool advantage. But at the end of the day, the client doesn't really care about that. All they care about is that you made efficient decisions to get that product built and that it works. So now the author of this article goes on to talk about how the tech market is constantly evolving. We've all seen massive successes over the years, from WhatsApp to Uber, Airbnb, and TikTok. And while these might be exceptions, such examples often set the North Star for people, something to strive for. This way of thinking puts extra pressure on engineers because they feel stress from inside thinking they're doing something wrong, and from the outside with people comparing their company to many competitors. To succeed in such an environment, companies need to move fast and break things, as the famous Facebook motto says. Today, this is more obvious than ever, with almost every company is becoming an AI company. Everyone is integrating ChatGPT, often for no real reason, without a strategy on how it will bring value. Now, this is something that I kind of feel right now as a software engineer. There's this whole AI thing coming out. It just blew up earlier this year. ChatGPT was really impressive. Now every business person out there is asking, how could we integrate ChatGPT into our product, into our process, because this is the future. And they're already trying to figure out how they could use it to automate business processes and probably eliminate jobs, eliminate work, get more efficient. And I think there's a lot of exploration going on about what this technology has to offer, but there are no real goals or end game or expectations for where this is going to lead to. Part of the reason for that is I don't think anybody really knows. I think business people want to explore it. Technology people are fascinated by it, but we have yet to see exactly what it's going to do and how it's going to mature, and exactly how it's going to change our lives for better or worse. However, if you're an engineer and you're given the directive, make AI work and do this really vague thing, that's a really stressful position to be in, because you don't have a goal to work towards and you don't really know what value you're adding. Like, if I'm working on an AI project and we don't know what it's going to lead to, I'm constantly asking myself, how can I do this in a way that adds value? With AI, I just don't know right now. One of the problems that I see with AI is that it's a very hyped up technology. It promises a lot, but is it really going to do all of the things that people think it will? Because what I see with AI is the results that it generates are kind of unreliable. You can't rely on it to create facts. And every time you do an AI query, the output's a little bit different. It's unpredictable. And it takes away the thing that I really like about working with computers, which is that you design a program, you put in this input, you could expect this output out of it. With AI, it's not like that. It's a completely different concept in that you don't really know what you're getting. It's a creative tool. That's something that's radically different from what we're used to with computers. And I think at some point, even the business people are going to start to realize, hey, maybe this thing isn't as reliable as we thought, or we're trying to use it in a way that isn't really best for it. In my opinion, I think AI is great for situations where the factual information doesn't matter so much. In other words, you could have some errors and it wouldn't be such a big deal. You could have like false positives in whatever it is that you're testing for, something like maybe a quality control sort of thing. And if you throw out some things that are good, then it's not that big of a deal. But the thing is, a lot of people are applying it to things that are very precise, and they're expecting it to pretty much do the work of a human without the accountability of a human to go back and fix things. So I think I've read enough of this article. If you want to read the full article, I have the link in the description. Let's move on to the next one, which is a Business Insider article titled, "I quit my $370,000 job at Meta after having panic attacks and hitting the lowest point in my life, and I knew the job wasn't right for me." So I think this article here is a very good cautionary tale of somebody who's eager to learn how to code, to go work in the software industry thinking that you're going to make a lot of money. $370,000 is actually a lot of money, but when you consider the cost of living in the San Francisco Bay Area and all the taxes that you're going to pay with it, your take-home pay may not be as much as you think. This article does a good job talking about the type of stress that you have to endure as a software engineer in these really high-paced environments. It's kind of like a Wall Street job in some aspects. So it says, Eric Yu quit Meta after he was making $10,000 a month from house hacking. Okay. So look, his income went from $370,000 to what would $10,000 a month be? $120,000 a year. So he ended up with less than half of his Meta income, and he was much happier. Eric Yu was a software engineer at Meta and experienced panic attacks due to work pressure. He brainstormed new ways to generate income because he wanted to quit his tech job. He left his high-paying job once he tried house hacking and grew confident in real estate investing. So in 2016, after a series of back-to-back interviews with Google, Meta, and Palantir, I was on a flight back home and received my software engineer letter from Facebook. At that moment, I felt like I had reached the top of a mountain. This is what Eric Yu has to say. A few days later, I also received an offer from Google. Landing job offers like these had been a huge goal of mine. I worked hard during school and it seemed like I finally had my life figured out, but I was pretty torn between Facebook and Google. That was pretty typical for a few years ago. Everybody wanted to work at Facebook and Google. At the same time, Facebook seemed more like a startup and less corporate than Google, and I also preferred its campus more, so I chose Facebook. The first year and a half of Facebook were pretty great. I was a new college grad who was starry-eyed and excited about my work, but about 2.5 years in, I started experiencing anxiety. I had my first panic attack during work hours. My typical day started at 7 a.m. That's pretty early. For me, I'm kind of a late waking up person. I'm not a morning person. So he says, I worked until noon, had lunch and a couple of meetings, and then drove back into intense coding blocks from 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Wait a second. What about all the meals and stuff and all the fun meetings and gatherings with coworkers that all the TikTokers like to post? I guess that didn't happen for him. Anyway, so maybe all those other people worked in other departments like HR. Even after work hours, I couldn't turn work off. I kept thinking about the problems at work and what I needed to do. I think the pressure and the environment of working in tech made it incredibly hard for me to disconnect after work. I would say that's true for me. Like, my brain is constantly working on problem solving, but I think one of the other pressures too of keeping up in the industry is that there's a lot of stuff to learn, and you kind of feel guilty like reading documentation during your workday. And I think a lot of engineers, especially newer ones who are uncertain, actually do a lot of homework off the clock, where they're trying to catch up on things with going on with the technology and kind of learn the tools that they're working with a little bit better. And that could add a lot of stress because you're always working and you just can't shut it off. In November 2019, I experienced my first panic attack when I was working from home. It was around 4 p.m. and my left pinky went completely numb. At first, I ignored it, but it got worse. An hour in, my ears were ringing and my heart was beating really fast. I was zoning out and felt intense thoughts. It felt like a water dam. Like if too much water pushed against it, it might break and all the water would pour out. The more I tried to block my feelings away, the more it felt like bursting all at once. Fortunately, my girlfriend, Wanda, now my fiance, was there and recognized it as a panic attack. You know, this guy is really lucky that he had a supportive partner to help him through that, because when you're going through intense stress like that, I guess, people feel stress in different ways, and having some sort of a physical manifestation isn't all that uncommon. I didn't know what a panic attack was at the time. I thought it was a one-off thing, but in the following months, it kept happening and got progressively worse. For 6 months from March to September 2020, I was at the lowest point in my life. Every day felt like a grind. I didn't know what I was doing or why I was still working. My performance started dropping. I couldn't focus on my code or keep up with the deadlines. This was during 2020. That was a very stressful time for a lot of people, and I remember myself being quite stressed out, not to the extent that this guy was, but 2020 was quite a stressful year for me. You know, nobody knew what the economy was going to do at that time. I didn't know what sort of job security that I had or how bad the pandemic was going to get. It was a very scary time. Okay, so now this part of the article gives a lot of insight into how he got there to this low with the panic attacks and the stress. So he focused on tough comments from engineers. Meta has a pretty high bar when it comes to code quality, and the code reviews were tough. At other companies I've interned at, the code reviews were very lenient. Somebody quickly looked at my work and improved it. But at Meta, there's a strong emphasis on writing code the right way, and you have to follow a specific design pattern and architectural styles. In these reviews, I collaborated with different teams to identify the best way to write code. There was some tension at times, and I received tough feedback on how to fix code after numerous reviews. Sometimes it left me feeling bad. In my opinion, there's a constructive way to give feedback, like, hey, I like the attempt that you made here, and there might be opportunities to improve it this way, but some engineers at Meta lack tact and nuance. This is really bad. You shouldn't have written it like this. This kind of feedback makes it sound like this is a black and white issue, and it often overlooks the emotional aspect of communication. I could sympathize with the situation that this person has been in because I've been in some very difficult work environments. Sometimes a team that you're with might just have a jerk on it who isn't very nice in the way that they give feedback, and that could be very stressful. And if it's a company culture to be that tough and that competitive, then it becomes kind of an exclusionary type of environment, because people who are a little nicer and easygoing, they don't last too long in a place like that. And I don't know, people in an environment like that, they're very code focused. Maybe they're all very smart people, but they don't have any people skills. They don't have any empathy for people who probably aren't at the level of coding that they are. And that could make it a really tough thing to fit into. I worked later than most of my team and even worked on weekends. Every time our team built a feature, we tested it out. Then if the feature worked well, we rolled it out to the entire world. If it didn't, we use those learnings to figure it out and what we want to build next. I remember one month I was the only engineer on the Android team because people were either on vacation or taking mental health leave. I didn't want my team to be held back because of me, so I felt pressure to perform. If I didn't stay up to speed and get those learnings quickly, then I'd be delaying future work streams, which would impact the whole team's progress. So I went the extra mile to get things done. I worked until 8 p.m., much later than most employees. I also spent about 4 hours a day on the weekends just to make sure I was keeping up with the pace. Looking back, my workload at that time was potentially unhealthy. I should have just told my manager that I couldn't handle it and that I needed more people to help me out. Yeah, that's a very difficult situation to be in. I've experienced something like that when I worked at an investment bank. There was a lot of pressure to work very late in the office. Some companies just have a culture like that. Not every tech company is like this, but it sounds like the environment at Facebook was very toxic. And my suggestion is that if you find yourself in an environment like that and you can't perform to that level, there are other places to work that are going to be just generally more comfortable to work in. And, some people, I guess they perform well in that Facebook type of environment. They really like the 370,000 or more money they're getting in income. But for some people, the amount of stress that you have to go through for that is just not worth it. The last straw was when my manager questioned my commit count. The process in which engineers write and add code to the code base is called commits. There was an internal dashboard where employees could see how much code each teammate had done over time. I don't think it was the healthiest thing to make it go public, and it was definitely stressful. I checked the dashboard every few weeks to see where I was relative to the team, to the broader organization, and at the company. I remember when I had just switched over to a new team, my manager pulled me into a conversation and told me he was upset about my commit count. I was slightly below the average of most of my team. But during my onboarding, the roadmap and vision of what this new team wanted to build weren't super obvious. So there weren't a lot of clear projects that were being delegated to me. It was a big reason my code count was a bit low. Okay, so this person seemed to be very poorly managed in that he wasn't being given an adequate workload, and then he was blamed for not having enough code commits. I think most reasonable software companies would probably not be looking at those sort of metrics that closely because of those sort of things. You might be working on different projects, and that could probably vary the amount of raw output that you're doing as far as code. You might actually spend, like the last article said, a lot of time on just a few lines of code that's going to be very mission critical. So I don't think commit count is a very good metric of programming progress, but a lot of managers and business people, they want to quantify everything. So that's one of the things that they pick out. They're like, okay, so how do we quantify how well our developers are doing so we could stack them against each other and figure out who to fire, who to promote, who to not pay so much? And that's just one of the things they come up with. And it comes from people who actually know very little about coding. I mean, my opinion is that in the end, what should really matter is not so much how much code that you're putting out in terms of quantity, but whether or not the system that you're working on functions the way that you want it to, and whether you're getting it done overall in a reasonable amount of time, and whether your client is happy. But in this environment, they have many developers. They have to figure out what the performance metrics are, and they're trying to quantify everything, and that's just kind of what they resort to. Now, a very difficult side effect of this is that as a developer, and this is an extreme example, what this guy's talking about at Facebook, but it could happen in any other company too, is that you constantly feel like you're kind of on a treadmill and you're just trying to keep up with all these new developments going on in technology and pump out code. And if you end up in a rut like this guy did, where it just so happens that the work that you're being assigned doesn't really fit your strengths very well, then you could really feel like you're in trouble. You hit burnout. You get a major case of imposter syndrome. Anybody who is conscious of what's going on at their company and very concerned about their career, they know that if for whatever reason the company feels like you're not performing up to their standards, they're just going to discard you and take you to the glue factory. So I guess this kind of takes us back to the first article that I was reading, where it was talking about, there's a section here it brings to mind about positive stress versus negative stress. In certain cases, you could have positive stress, which will improve your performance because you're motivated to try to accomplish a goal. That type of stress is healthy, but you could also have negative stress, like what this guy experienced, where your performance goes down and you just have a lot of anxiety because you don't really feel in control of your situation. And I think right now, with the industry moving so fast and this whole AI thing coming down the pipe, it's stressful for a lot of people, and it's easy to have that negative stress manifest. So whether you're an experienced developer working at a company or if you're thinking about joining the industry, negative stress is something to think about and how you're going to deal with it. It'll be very interesting to see what you guys have to say in the comments about how you deal with stress, kind of what you're feeling with the industry now. Do you think AI is causing you stress and all the changes going on in the industry? Or is it something that you're not really worried about and you think AI is just a hype that will fizzle out? I hope you enjoyed this discussion talking about the stress of working in the software industry. It's something that doesn't get enough attention because people want to learn how to code. They see all the benefits and rewards, but they don't think about the downsides and how maybe there's another career field that is a better fit for you out there. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.